Hey guys, so I bought a fold-up piano and I wasn't hopeful at all about it, but because I have really bad neck pain if I do too much piano and my little grand piano in the music room, plus it's really, really cold in there in winter, it's concrete floor, so it all adds to the sort of pain of I mean, it's very important to keep warm if you're playing. If you play for too long in the cold, your muscles really suffer. So a bit of a tip there, keep warm. And if you're busking and it's winter, get one of those vests. I did have one. Basically, it has sort of batteries in it and you charge them. They only last about 40 minutes, unfortunately. But if you can buy a pack of 2 or you buy the vest with 2 and you just slot them into the pockets. It looks a bit like a cop. A jacket, a bulletproof jacket that a policeman might wear. It's kind of similar. And you just plug it in after you've charged up the batteries, put the battery in the pocket, charge them up, and it gets all warm. I used it actually not for performing, not for busking, but for drawing one time. So the 40 minutes did go very, very quickly, but, it needs a must sometimes if you're busking or something, especially at Christmas. So, I wasn't going to do a review of that, but I've done one. I'm going to do a review of my fold-up piano. So I wanted a fold-up piano so that I could change position, and specifically if I was having an attack, because I get these flare-ups, which is just excruciating sort of lock in my neck that I can't get rid of. And it's completely and utterly my own doing. It's all to do with strength, because tension, rather. So if I let go of the tension consciously, it will stop hurting, but I'm unable to do that without making the conscious effort. And, basically you need a rest once you've got to that stage. But sometimes I don't have a rest. Sometimes I've just got to beaver away at something, and especially if there's a deadline or I've got a class or I'm teaching or something like that. So I wanted to get something that I could change position in, and possibly in an extreme situation where I've got to practice for something, I could still play and I could do it in bed. So the first thing to note about this fold-up piano, and actually let me check the name of it because that's important. It wasn't Gary, but it was similar. It's Glarry, Glarry, but it's a pretty generic product. I mean, there are loads of them on Amazon, and they're probably made by the same company, I would have thought. But this one is Glarry. And the first thing you notice is it's actually heavier than you think. It looks really light in the pictures, but it is quite heavy. Of course it is. It's got a lot of, technical stuff in it. And it's a full 88 key. I got the 88 key, really important. So I opened it out. There's a little switch button thing that flattens it and keeps it sort of locked in that position. So it's opened out. It's as wide as your normal sort of 88 key keyboard. The first thing I noticed was I put it on a table which isn't wide enough for it. So I've had to mount it under a few books at the edges because it does, the natural curvature leans towards, both ends going down slightly. And that might matter. It could matter for the strength of the actual object, but it could also matter for your playing because it's going to slightly distort the level of the keyboard. Of course it is. So bear that in mind. So I really need something akin to a floorboard, cut to size, so that I can mount it on that just to make sure it's nice and flat. The last thing I want is to break it, okay? So that's the first thing. It does, unless it's on a fully stable surface, it does tend to droop at the ends. It's very slight, but it's there, okay? So there's weight at the ends. It's not all in the centre, and that's sort of pulling it down, as it were. The other thing I noticed, I opened it at my mum's, actually, because it was in a huge box. I get my stuff delivered to her, and it's in a huge box. Well, no, that's a box that's bigger than the item you imagine, because the picture shows it in a little carry bag thing because it's folded in half. So I thought, well, I'm not going to get that in my granny trolley, so I needed to take it out the box and put it in the granny trolley, etc., which I did. So yes, I played the keys, but it wasn't plugged in, and I thought, oh my word, they feel quite weighty, Now I prefer a light key because it's gentler on my hands, and my stage piano I can alter them. But I actually played this and I thought, do you know what? I think I might prefer this. First impression, I prefer it. It cost me 56 quid, guys. 56 quid for, if you're thinking of starting piano with me, Monday the next one goes live. If you're thinking of starting with me, £56. There was a bit of a delay delivering because of Christmas, but essentially I got this one on eBay, and essentially it's pretty quick. So you could buy one and you could start with me in a week or so, which would be fantastic, absolutely fantastic. If you become a member, I get really involved with my students. We can do loads of jams together and we can just do lots and lots of exciting things. So it's worth thinking about. But there's tons and tons and tons of free stuff as well on the Patreon account there. So, you will get free stuff. So get that piano, please, or the cello or the viola or the, what's the other one I play? Double bass. So, yeah, please do it. Anyway, sorry to plug. I hate doing that. I couldn't help it. I'm so excited about the whole concept of, the membership thing. So the next thing I did, obviously, was at home, put it straight, flat. That worked. And I've got this table that slides under a bed with the top above the bed. So you can just sort of slide the wheels or the base under the bed. Do you see what I mean? And it goes across. And I thought when I'm in a lot of pain, that's going to be a treat. Well, it's really wide. I mean, it's as wide as the bed almost. So it's not quite as practical. If I did something like break my leg, where I was literally bedridden for months and months, I would definitely rig that up. I would have it on a swivel top that I could just swivel round and play to my heart's content, or more to the point, to compose, because that's really what I do. While I remember, actually, I am going to do on the Patreon, I'm going to do a tier just for electronica and composing, because it's such a big part of my life. I don't just play instruments. I'm, above and beyond, I'm a composer, and I work with a lot of electrical stuff and digital stuff, and have really good fun with synths, and that's a big part of what I do. So I thought, well, let's maybe that's a better communicator with today's audience, than sort of traditional acoustic musicianship, which is a whole other bag, really. Anyway, so not so practical to get over the bed, but this table that I have that I can pull across the bed is actually adjustable, and it's really high because, as it goes across the bed, I've got a 4-poster bed and it's really high itself. So this table was really high, so I just started playing it standing up, and it was absolutely fantastic. I had no pain. I found it very comfortable. I sort of had the telly on in the background so that I wasn't feeling... I think, you know what you need, I think, for a piano? You need to have something visual, not the volume up necessarily, but like a view. I mean, my ideal would be looking out to a private moat and a field. Of course it would. That's the view. What a really good view does to the human brain is absolutely incredible. And it satisfies certain sort of ambient processes that help when you're doing other things. There's loads of scientific evidence to prove that. I'll write an essay on it. I might do one today. Who knows? Maybe over the weekend. So, you can do that. You can stand after you've been sitting all day in front of a computer, which just feels really, really nice. You're relaxed. Your arms are positioned correctly because you've adjusted the table accordingly. You can't adjust a piano. You can adjust the stool, yes, but adjusting the piano just seems even better for me. And when you're having a little repose, when you've just done a whole flurry like 20 times, which is what I do if I can't get something right. You might need just to take a breather. Always remember to breathe and just sort of glance up, and there's something happening that makes you feel that you're connected with the world. You don't get that sort of locked-in syndrome. You don't get you don't feel like you're not part of anything, which I do think pianists can really feel that sometimes, because it's such a solitary instrument, generally speaking, unless you've got a band together, or unless, you're playing with an orchestra. But, realistically, piano playing quite often takes up a lot of solitary time. Any playing does, of course. But you see, when I practice my double bass and my cello, I've got a window. I can look out French doors, which, that's fantastic. And I don't feel that need to have something that isn't a bare wall in front of me. But when I'm playing the piano, I'm sort of facing a corner. There's a bit of artwork, but it doesn't do anything, So the thing with a view, I think it's just simple things like very occasionally there's a bird or there's a breeze and you see, movement, leaves moving. Or you might see a humanoid round the back doing something, in their garden or whatever. And I just think that is, a unifying experience. It feels connected, and I quite like that. So anyway, I played it, and I love it. I absolutely love it. Now look, it's got hundreds of things on it I didn't even look at. It took me a while to work out how to change the volume, and it only really works for me on one setting, and that's, I think it's the electric piano setting anyway. The notes were not holding on other settings. They were really short. But there's tons of them. There are chords, and it's not what I need for composing. For composing, actually, I strip everything back bare to a skeletal piano, and then I build from a skeleton of, a riff, and then I build up from there. I don't start with, loads of stuff. You can record on it. I'm never going to use that. I doubt I'm going to plug that. I'm going to plug it straight into my DAW. It's got a MIDI lead and everything. It works on a USB, a little USB, which is fantastic. I think it's 5 volts it requires. It's absolutely fantastic. It just works superbly in all ways. And of course, if I do start a band, or if I want to, I did think, if somebody wanted me to go around and do a workshop with a bunch of kids, I could actually offer that service now, because I've got a piano, that folds up into a black bag with handles. And I think it even had a music pouch, as I recall. I obviously it's gone under the bed. The bag's under the bed, guys. I'm not going to be going out with it anytime soon. But that ability is there. If you wanted to be a piano teacher, you could actually not worry about having to have people around your house, which is something I never want to do. For privacy reasons, it's really important, I think, for some people, especially if you're trying to make a name for yourself and as a musician, and then, you've got people sort of clamouring at the door asking for lessons. Just the last thing you want, really. So the ability to pack up your keyboard and pop it in the car or get on a bus with it. You could get on a bus with it. You could even, although I don't think you need to because it's quite loud, but you could even take your little Roland Cube practice amp to give it a bit more amplification. I think that'd be quite heavy, but the speakers on it are great. They're absolutely great. Now, the reviews on it were mostly brilliant. I went for one with brilliant reviews because, as I say, it seems to be a bit generic, but there were people saying in reviews things like, it doesn't sound like a real piano. Well, of course it's not going to sound like a real piano. It's just not going to, it's not going to have all that, resonance and ambience. And yes, it is going to feel very, very different. There's going to be very little sort of, reverb and all of those things. The acoustics are completely different. That doesn't mean it's not a good product. Other people were saying it didn't, it didn't quite balance correctly. But again, as long as you get that bit of wood, I think, or a wide table, you're going to be absolutely fine. Guys, look, I've been talking for nearly 15 minutes. I'm running out of time. I better go. So, so join me this year if you want to learn piano. Really excited. Or cello, or viola, or double bass. I'm working through Suzuki books to start with in the first few weeks because I like Suzuki the way it launches us into the basics, but also the Continuum method, which is my personal pedagogy, which I've created. So, have a great weekend off. It's been hectic, guys, hectic.